All right. I think forgiveness is one of the most powerful weapons we have as a Christian. 'Cause forgiveness relieves us of the temptation and responsibility of punishing people. And my mom named me Daniel. So Daniel means God is my judge. And there's been a lot of times people want to judge me or want to push their wrath or their consequences in my life. But forgiveness frees me from the responsibility of trying to correct people, punish them, cancel them from my safe spaces. It's not really the responsibility of the church to punish people, but I do believe in discipline. There is time for confrontation, there's a time for correction. So don't get me wrong on that. But oftentimes, we get trapped by trying to prove ourselves right. And the harder we try to prove ourselves right, the more wrong we become. And there was a time when I was in jail and all of these people were trying to find so much wrong in what I was doing, they missed what was right. And even when I was in jail, when you're in Orange, there's all kinds of people wanting to virtue signal on you. And I was fasting and praying, and guess what? The cops decided to put me in solitary confinement because I was fasting, and they thought it was wrong. I think most people would think there's nothing wrong with fasting and praying. Like, that's probably a good thing if prisoners are doing that and seeking God's face. But for whatever reason, they found fault in it. And even in the book of Daniel, so Daniel got in trouble for praying. And guess what? The people that were trying to go around the chain of command went to the king and had him pass an unlawful order and had him thrown in the lion's den, right? So I also want to remind you people that God is just. And we as Christians should pursue justice. And justice is a good thing. Mercy and grace is for those who repent more. But ultimately, God is judge over all these things. And that leads me to another story. I've been I have a Bible study teacher or kind of a mentor. He's more of a teacher. He is very passionate when it comes to teaching the Bible. And he taught me the story of Judah and Tamar. And when he taught it to me, it was like the finger of God to me. It happened probably 2 or 3 years ago. But if you read the story of Judah or Joseph, you'll understand more about all the different variables that are working in this story. There's just a lot going on in this story. And when Luke Lim, in honor of him, when he went through that story with me, it brought a whole new light to a lot of things that I didn't understand about that. Because when you're young and you're just reading through the Bible, you miss a lot of things. So originally, Joseph and his brothers, Joseph, one of the youngest brothers, was canceled by Judah, and Reuben and a lot of his brothers hated him because his father loved Joseph more than any of the brothers, and he was one of the youngest. And they canceled Joseph or expelled him from their family. So much so that they came so close to murdering him. So all these self-righteous people in Joseph's family exist. They wanted to punish him, and he's wrong, and finding all sorts of wrong in Joseph when Joseph was actually um, exalted to be a great ruler once he was older. And I've heard a lot of narcissistic pastors, I guess, preach on this passage, and they want to put so much shame on Joseph and everything else. But I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. But eventually, Judah, one of the brothers, was humbled only by the grace of God. And Judah had at least, I think, if I remember right, 3 sons. And one of his sons married a woman named Tamar, or I'm going to call her Tamar. I don't know the official way of saying it. But Tamar was not Jewish, and she was kind of an outsider, even. And Judah's son was killed by God because he is wicked. And then, according to law at that time, because guess what? Bearing fruit and having children is kind of important. And how things worked back then was that the brother would then have to sleep with his brother's wife to produce children so that the nation can go on, so life can continue to go on. Because guess what? Having children and having life is important, people. And especially today in our society with Charlie Kirk being assassinated, one of the principles for presidents that he pushed was get married young and having children. And guess what? That should be applicable to today. That's applicable to today. So anyway, so Tamar slept with the other brother, and guess what? He spilled his semen on the ground because he did not want to impregnate his brother's wife, and God killed him too because he thought he was wicked. And so I guess the way Luke preached this to me is that there's all this bad reputation surrounding Tamar. But Tamar was actually a righteous woman, and the family may have been like, oh, stay away from Tamar. Like she's like this evil woman. But the opposite was true. And no one knew her heart or her intentions. And so Judah told Tamar, wait till my son gets old enough so I can give him to you to have a child. And guess what? When it came time for that son to be old enough to give her children, he did not give his son to her. So guess what? Tamar took things in her own hands in some respect. One day when Judah was coming back from somewhere, from herding the sheep or something like that, Tamar saw him coming, and she put on clothes and made a tent or something like that and acted like a prostitute. And Judah was walking by and was like, hey, I want to sleep with this prostitute. And he didn't recognize who she was. And so he slept with her and she became pregnant, but she took his staff as a pledge to be paid because he was going to pay her with some sheep or goats. But she like ran away with the staff and never accepted the payment for the goats. So Judah just left. Was like, where's the prostitute that was here? I was going to pay her a couple goats or something like that for her service. But they said when he talked to the people, they said there's no prostitute around here. We don't know what you're talking about. So Judah has kind of stopped at that because he didn't want to shame himself. And this story is about self-righteous pride and arrogance and people who call themselves Christians. I guess you could say, well, back then they weren't called Christians. They're just people who believed in God. But there is a ton of application in this story for today. And I think Luke Lim would agree with me, and he's an elder in the church. So there'll be people who accuse you, you're twisting scriptures, you're using it to itch people's ears. But I would say people that say that are probably trying to get their ears itched too. But anyway, there's a really good message in this story. So after Tamar was pregnant and it became obvious, messengers went to Judah. It was like, hey, Tamar had played the harlot and now she's pregnant. And guess what? Judah was more than happy. Oh, let's go stone her. Like, right? Judah's probably thinking, oh, she killed both my sons. I finally get to get revenge on her, right? Oh, who knows what he was thinking, right? There are a lot of self-righteous Christians out there that are ready to kill you or ready to cancel you from their safe spaces. They do not understand why God is moving this person in such a way. So Judah was going to stone her, and then she presents Judah's staff. This is the man that got me pregnant. Boy, howdy. I wish I was there. So Judah got absolutely humiliated. And that's what it's going to take for some Christians to realize how truly wicked they are. Because Tamar wanted to have children, and her motivation and her heart was pure. And Judah had to admit that she is more righteous than I. Could you imagine being some great ruler like Judah and having being humbled by Tamar, who's not um, culturally acceptable? Do you understand what that would feel like as a man? And then a woman humbling you like that? Wow. And so it is through this story that I've learned a lot of wisdom through Tamar. I love Tamar. And I also love Hannah, the story of Hannah. But anyway, was people like to obsess over this that they can obsess over Tamar acting like a prostitute, right? Did she commit adultery? No. I'm sorry to let some of you charismatic Christians and legalistic Christians out there, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but sometimes God uses circumstances in ways that we cannot possibly imagine to humble people. So if Judah had had his way, Tamar would have been barren the rest of her life and died without a child. And even more importantly, who knows if Judah's son would have been able to have children either. So Judah's family was kind of in despair, right? Both of his children, two sons, have died for their wickedness. And maybe Judah, if Tamar confronted Judah about his youngest son, he may have still said no. So what Tamar did was actually an act of God. And some people will be like, no, she's an evil adulterer. Everybody wants to obsess over what she did. It was deceptive, like how evil. But the truth is, what she did was righteous. And God can do similar things today that trump a normal rule because of people's hardness of hearts and their self-righteous arrogance and wickedness, that he will humble somebody through a circumstance, really exposing the real evil people. So after this example, after Luke kind of presented this story to me, he pointed out how Judah changed after this. It was only by God's grace and mercy that Judah was humbled or humiliated. After some time, after Joseph was gone from the family from some time, he became a great ruler, and there was a famine. And the rest of the brothers, they did not know what happened to Joseph. But Judah was the one that was willing to sacrifice his life to protect his brothers. His heart totally changed. Instead of being ready to kill his brothers, he's willing to give his life for his brothers, to protect them. That is a real heart change in a Christian, a man willing to give his life for his friends. So you see this Christian way of life even in the Old Testament. I'm always being canceled or dismissed by pastors are like, that's the Old Testament. You can't use that, Karens, all the time about this message. Well, I'm going to appeal to you now, to the elder at Cornerstone, about the message of Christ that is presented in this old story. So you see Tamar doing some elusive things, right? But there's always like a general rule or law that we should obey. But when people are too hard-hearted and rebellious, God can give exceptions. Just like in the New Testament, it says that we should obey authorities. I think Apostle Paul talked about that. That same law or word that we should obey about obeying authorities, it is, we should always do that the best we can until there's an exception. That has always been true since the beginning until the end of time. And there's a lot of things in the Bible that we should obey that Jesus says, but there are always exceptions to those words, right? When Apostle Paul said we should obey authorities, he himself didn't always obey them, right? Because sometimes the authorities told him he couldn't speak about Jesus, and he still taught about Jesus, right? So there's a time when we should always obey, and there's exceptions to the law, to what Jesus says, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say. Or an apostle or any of the people in the Bible when they give us encouragement or guidance. Because there's a lot of details in our circumstances that may trump and allow us to break a law. Yes, break a law or an ordinance from any leader. And we see that throughout all history, right? Even Jesus, right? During the time when he was here on earth, the religious authorities were trying to cancel him and they were trying to push him to stop doing what he was doing. Did he obey them? No, he did not. So there's a time when we should obey, and there's a time when we should submit to God and disobey men, right? And what everybody thought was wrong with me quite a few times was everything that was right in me that God made. And we see that in the story of Daniel, right? We see that in the story of Tamar and Hannah and Paul. And yeah, there's a lot of examples like this in history. And I think in Isaiah chapter 1, you have some pretty neat examples that we can follow um, about, and then there's Esther too. I guess I won't go over that, but God has a plan, right? I like Isaiah because it's during a time of great trouble for the nation, and America's in a lot of trouble right now. And I just know that God has a purpose for me, and his purpose will prevail. And with Charlie Kirk's sacrifice, a lot of people are coming to prayer and knowing God more than they have in a while. And my prayer is that we can be restored and reconciled to Christ, but also that we can be free and not be trying to judge everyone so much. All right. Love you all. Godspeed.